the same thing, right? It's not designed to be read cover to cover. So maybe the difference is that it's not necessarily, in both cases you have some information or some data which you structure, right? In a material, in a kind of visual form, but maybe the difference has to do with a kind of reading and the kind of access, right? It's maybe systematic access versus kind of partial access.
Or maybe it has to do with like the kind of depth and like a directed purpose of like, you know, conveyance of specifics as opposed to, you know, like you read the telephone book, you don't get a lot of, you know, excess information, or if you look at the subway map, you don't know what you can do at each of those stations. Like it doesn't tell you what's, you know, like anything beyond the specifics, the sort of directed specific purpose.
But information design and information visualization are different things. So book could fit into the information design idea, but what you're showing is information visualization, I think.
Even this one, yes. Well, I think the difficulties that people do use this terms interchangeably, right? So the type, yes, this is, sorry, you're right, this is information visualization. So we put information design and we're going to get something different. It's interesting. Yeah. So in some ways, this is an also interesting way to see what these fields are, right? You can see like what are the number of examples which come up. So, well, kind of the same things comes up actually in some, but also other things, right? You also get.
You have a Venn diagram up on top.
Yeah. So I think all these things are overlapping a lot, right? But I think we do have different centers, but there's lots of overlap, right? For example, you get something here, which is not just images, right? But you also have lots of text.
There's also a design issue even involved with the phone book, though, which has to do with its type font, which was developed by, it's called Bell, and has larger ink traps, and has a large X height. So there's design issues involved even with the phone book. It's not an arbitrary object. And so I just want to point that out as well.
I mean, one thing which, but I don't know if it's going to hold up or not. I mean, because now you guys introduced so many new concepts which are all very, very good. I thought that maybe one of the differences has to do with the fact that unless I'm doing some artist's book, right, but if I'm doing normal book, there's a certain kind of template, right, there's a certain convention of how you design a book. Yes, I can vary fonts, you know, I can, you know, put different headers, whereas with information design, yes, okay, there's a number of different established visualization, type of visualization I can use. And let's say there are certain books which will give me some suggestions on what to use what, but ultimately every time you invent a particular visualization for particular data. So to a certain extent it's more open than a book design. But again, I'm not sure if this is going to hold up this distinction, right, at a close, you know, at a close range. And then maybe another thing I just want to throw, and again, you know, this is not, it's just a proposal, in trying to also maybe understand the difference. And again, I think it will maybe work for some cases, but not for others. I was also trying to understand the difference between, let's say, information visualization and this example already doesn't. It's not going to hold for this example. But if we go into the metro station, sorry guys, and again, I'm not sure if it's going to hold up, you know, but it will probably apply to some examples. Well, so if you think about the book, right? Do you guys know the idea of markup language, like HTML? Okay, so think about the book. Okay, it's a kind of markup, right? Meaning the book already, the traditional book is a kind of, it's like precursor to XML, right? Meaning that if I'm designing and I get a book, I'm not sure if this is semantics or syntax. I think it's actually something else. But let's say the structure of a book is already available to me. In other words, if I get the book and says, okay, chapter 1, right? You know, page 1, chapter 1, you know, part 1. So a structure, right? A structure of information is already given. Right? In other words, if I'm a book designer, or if I'm a designer of a telephone book, right? Or if I'm a designer of this map of DC Metro, right? My job is to take the information and the structure of this information which is defined a priori and visualize it. In other words, somebody says, okay, this is a list of all the stations and how the stations are connected. Well, in scientific visualization, and again, I'm not saying this distinction is going to hold for every example, but it seems to me intuitively it will hold to a certain subset of designs. For example, if I'm doing something like this, I may have no idea, I just have raw data, right? So let's say, again, I don't know if it's true or not, but I imagine, I run some particle accelerator, right? Or let's say we put sensors on around these mountains, and the sensors are going to measure temperature. And let's say we get like millions of these temperature measurements. Again, maybe it's not true, but let's say if you give this data to me, yes, I will have some idea if there are some seasonal variations, but beyond that, I don't really know what this data is, right? I just have a big set of numbers, and I'm going to kind of visualize it in a particular way. And in fact, I'm going to turn this into kind of analog representation, right? So in this case, let's say maybe I'm using different colors to represent different conditions, and then hopefully I'll see if my data has any particular structure. So I think maybe one of the differences, and again, I'm not saying this difference would hold for everything, with information design, I already know what the structure of data is, right? I already know what the structure of metro network is, I just have to visualize it. So maybe this is also one of the differences which works in some cases.
Can I add something?
Please, please, please.
And also maybe another distinction could be, like you can manipulate visually, I would say, on information design. For instance, that those rules are not straight. But what you are doing is just making a manipulation. Yes. But
yes.
it could be a scientific visualization, and I don't think that would be valid. It's not a map. It's not showing the graphical representation of cities and towns and whatever.
Because you're not preserving certain properties such as distances.
Yes.
Well, the design adds another information.
Visual
what
manipulation for us to receive the thing.
Whereas, for example, in this case, let's say this is actually based on the actual topography, right? The actual topography and topology. What you're doing, you're just adding a level of data to this, let's say, map. Because in this case, you create this kind of abstract map, right? And in other words, yes, you represent the topography, but not geometry.
Yeah, but at very advanced levels of scientific visualization, like in particle physics, it's kind of arbitrary how it's imaged, right? Because you just have sensor data, so you can image it one way or another, depending on what you find is most useful. Maybe sense of scale is
when you create a formula and it just does the whole thing, but here you have a right to change things. Like, I mean, there's a human factor in information visualization design.
But see, isn't there always that kind of, there's like an illusion that, you're sort of creating this formula and that the visualization is just like kind of applying itself, but it's still being applied through like some kind of, like filter criteria. I don't know, it's just a question.
But maybe it might sound too mathematical, but I think there is this function in the scientific visualization is one-to-one, which is, whatever is there is represented in terms of how you define it. Of course, there is a definition. But information visualization, you have a right to manipulate things to enhance it visually. You play with the proportions and this and that.
and this is not data visualization, it's information visualization.
Or you think there's a difference between information visualization and data visualization? Oh my God, don't tell me that. If you know, but you think so, you think it's also two different things, because I didn't know it was, I thought people use it interchangeably, but I'm not sure.
Well, I was not sure either, because you were using it interchangeably too, right?
Yeah, please.
But see, my question is like, isn't
Wow,
it?
you guys really, wow, you are really all, you should really write a collectively book about it, because I don't think anybody really clearly was able to define it or even systematically address these questions. Interesting, yes.
Well, it's like in order for the act of making it a visualization, for that to kind of like give more information in the raw data, doesn't there have to be some kind of like imposition of some kind of like order or criteria? Or else isn't it just like making a map of the world?
I think it's the map of the world.
Okay, but then if it's one-to-one, then there's nothing, there's no sort applied. Like, I don't know.
There's a certain type of filtering mechanism. I agree on that.
Yeah.
You have some terms and decisions, but not as manipulated as
Uh-huh.
the other filter.
So I think you're picking up at something which is definitely sounds correct.